Okay, well, I think we'll just wait one more minute for people to arrive, and then we will get started. Right, I have 1 minute past the hour, so I think we will start. Hello and welcome to our webinar, OpenJDK Migration Stories from Dismay to Delight. My name is Simon Ritter. I'm the Deputy CTO at Azul, and I'm joined today by Jay Patel, who's one of our senior sales engineers. Jay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Simon. This is Jay Patel. I'm one of the senior sales engineers, as Simon said. I work the Northeast United States, also Central, and I've been doing quite a few migrations, so looking forward to this discussion.
Okay, so before we get started on the actual discussion, there's a few housekeeping things that we need to deal with. First of which is, if you have questions during this presentation, then feel free to put those into the Q&A box, which is part of the Zoom interface. We'll deal with those at the end. It's going to be easier rather than trying to deal with them as we go through. So any questions people have, we'll address those at the end of the session. We are recording this session, so we will send you a link to that afterwards. So if you want to share this with your colleagues or your friends or even your family, if you want to, then you can do so. One of the things we're going to do is we are going to talk through a number of different scenarios where we've worked with specific customers who've made the migration from Oracle JDK to OpenJDK. And because of commercial sensitivities, we're not going to name those customers, but I guarantee that they are real customers. And as Jay will explain, goes through the details of that, it will become apparent that we're not just making this up. The other thing is that we will be having a survey at the end. It's very useful for us to understand what you think of this webinar, whether there's other things we can do to change it to make it more useful to you. To get started, the whole idea of this is around talking about migration from Oracle JDK to OpenJDK. That's something that's become a lot more relevant to users of Java over the last few years with the way that Oracle have changed both the licensing and the pricing of their JDK. What we've tried to do at Azul, because we offer Azul Platform Core, which is an alternative build of OpenJDK that you can use in place of the Oracle JDK, we've tried to make it as easy as possible to understand that migration process. And we've actually written the book, the OpenJDK Migration for Dummies book, which contains a lot of information about the process involved, things you might come up against in terms of like desktop deployment technologies and things like that, how to evaluate different OpenJDK builds and so on. And really the idea behind this presentation is to talk about specific cases, as I said, where we've gone through this with customers and to understand how they approached it and the things that they had to deal with during that. So let's get started then. Now, when we were talking about this earlier, Jay, one of the things that you came up with as a sort of description of the migration process, you said there was one that you described as the carrot and stick. Now, can you kind of explain that in a bit more detail to me of what you mean by that?
Sure. Let me give a bit of background. All right. So this was a health services provider up in the north, just under the Great Lakes anyway. And they had compliance issues, right? So they had security concerns. They had thoughts about, where they're protecting data. So they needed to make sure that they were compliant from a security perspective to get started. So they came up with this analogy, the stick versus the carrot. The stick was, we will update your Java on the machines, right? That's it. We have to. It's PII data, and we cannot be in a situation that we are going to get in trouble. There was a massive revolt when that happened, as usual, right? The developers are like, well, we can't be standard or just have one version of Java. You can't dictate that to us. So then they went with a stick versus carrot solution. The stick was on any machine that is a production grade machine that's serving PII data, they have to move that stuff over. And that basically centered around sysadmins that were working on those machines. And so they pushed with automation, they pushed to about, I think it was about 4,000 server instances, all of the changes that they had to make. Of that, nothing went wrong. It's shocking, right? Like it just didn't go wrong. They had stable, solid versions of Java. They tested ahead of time. They pushed out their automation, and it worked. On the developer side, it's the carrot. It was like, guys, please use this stuff. We have to migrate off. You can't introduce anything into the environment that we've now stabilized. So they allowed them to move to the versions that they wanted, but they also encouraged them as they went to make sure that they use stable, solid, updated versions of Java in all of their build and CI/CD processes.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that you kind of mentioned there that I want to pick up on. First of those was the fact that that customer had issues around compliance. That's obviously a big thing, isn't it? Because many companies in situations where they hold sensitive data like personal details or credit card information, they have to be in compliance with regulations, and most of the time that involves running on supported software. They couldn't use a free alternative to the OpenJDK.
Yeah, there's two things about that. One, they had a financial penalty, right? If they don't, and I think most of us now have financial penalties. If you don't have your stuff updated in time, then it's 30 days or something like that from NIST, from the NIST database. And they absolutely have to do that. Second thing is they were running OpenJDK. Some of it was in OpenJDK already. And it's the respins that were causing them grief, right? They would take away 2 weeks of the time that they needed to do 5,000 machines. So it was important to have something that was 0-day released from a security patch perspective that then they could operate on to do the rest of their work.
Yeah. And the other thing that I really picked up on there, what you were talking about, was this the idea that they rolled out 5,000 machines, you said.
Yeah.
The fact that they had absolutely no issues with that obviously relied on testing ahead of time. And that was the key thing that you said there. Doing a pre-production test to make sure that everything works is absolutely critical to the success of a deployment like that. And I think one of the things that's really important to get across here is how a user can know that if you move from, let's say, the Oracle JDK to Azul's platform core, how do you know that what you're getting is functionally identical? And that really comes down to what's called the TCK, the Technology Compatibility Kit. What that allows you to do is to see, well, okay, there's like 100,000+ tests that you have to pass every single one of those tests on the build that you create of the distribution for OpenJDK. And that does give you a very high level of confidence that what you're getting is functionally identical. Even though we're starting from exactly the same point in terms of the source code, we're using the same build scripts, we also test it with these 100 and whatever thousand tests. Sure.
So that's actually in your book. So there's a chapter in your book that's actually related to this. And it was super important. They went through, they read it, they understood that TCK testing or JCK tests mean that an OpenJDK is an OpenJDK, including Oracle Java SE, right? So they had, we'll go through this in a couple other scenarios that I have, but they had some exceptions, but all the stuff they did, zero issues across the board, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really the important thing to help people understand is that if you approach this in the right way and you do that by pre-testing, the fact that you've got an identical product in terms of functionality is going to mean that in a situation like that where you're deploying into machines, it is just very, very straightforward. Most of the time you're going to be taking up with a migration like this is the planning and the testing, but the actual deployment itself is going to go ahead really quite quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, the discovery phase was the hardest phase. The execution and the validation, very, very short.
Great. So let's kind of like switch to another example and tell me about like for example, what's the biggest migration that you've been involved in terms of like number of machines and applications and so on?
All right, I'm going to try not to say the name here. It is a global product, and it's a global product company that I'm not describing well, but they basically had an unlimited, from our perspective, set of desktops and over 100,000 server instances, right? So that's not just vCores, that's actual server instances. They had 6 months to make the migration happen. right? Multiple business units across the world. They had clandestine concerns, everything you could possibly imagine, and they were able to achieve it. One of the reasons why, and I can't get into too much detail, but one of the reasons why they were able to achieve it was their methodology was to say, if anybody was on our list, our discovery list, and had Java in their environment, and they didn't come and talk, and they didn't migrate, they were on the hook for the new licensing. So can we talk about the new licensing model for a
Yeah,
second?
absolutely.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things is if you have any Oracle Java in your environment that's within a certain range, 8U, 202, all the way up to about 16. Not 17's got some weird stuff in it. If you've got any of it in your environment, then you are on the hook for every user that you, or every employee of your company. So for these guys, it was 8 million plus per year, right? And so everybody in the company had to migrate off in order for them to be in that compliant nature, right? And so by telling people that their one little application was going to potentially cost them $8 million a year, that got people moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that has had a huge impact on people's approach to looking at migration and how important it is to migrate off the Oracle JDK. As you rightly say, I mean, Oracle changed the pricing structure that they used back in January this year, and they moved away from what was a reasonably fair approach in terms of like, well, they would bill based on the number of vCores that you were using to run your Java applications and the number of what they call named user plus, which is basically how many people were using desktops or laptops. So that was a reasonably fair sort of assessment in terms of how many people or how many machines were using Java. But then they said, let's simplify it for them. In terms of saying, well, let's just switch to however many people you employ, and that's full-time employees, part-time employees, contractors, and any employees of companies who are supporting your Java applications externally. And so, as you say, that kind of leads to like an $8 million bill for companies of that size.
Yeah, it was more than that. I couldn't say
yeah.
the exact number, but it was
Yeah,
much more than that.
but certainly in the millions. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that we try to do at Azul with our platform core is to kind of simplify this. And for companies that get to that sort of size, we just have, as you mentioned, this unlimited deal that we do, where you don't have to count anymore. It's just like it's an unlimited deal, so you can just use it wherever you want to. Applies to all the versions that you need, so that there's no counting it and trying to figure out, are we licensed for this machine or that machine. It's just like deploy it where you want, and off you go. And I think as well that the fact that you said that they sort of did this in 6 months is a very kind of good sort of indication of how well this works. Because often when we talk to customers about this, one of the things that they think about is, okay, my Oracle contract is expiring on this date, and they need to plan for that. So they need to think to themselves, how much time do I need to do that kind of migration? So your kind of example there is very good, and clearly they must have approached this with the idea of how long it's going to take them and planning that in advance.
And just anybody that's on the phone, if you are getting a call, don't answer it. Talk to Simon or somebody first, or myself. I don't know if I can actually say that, but sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, definitely. If people have got questions, we're very happy to talk to them about like all the details and how it all kind of works and everything. Okay, that's good. So big companies can make that shift very easily. They've got the IT department, they've got the sort of infrastructure there, they've got all the processes in place, and they can approach this in a very formal kind of way. What about if we're dealing with a company that's a lot smaller? So they may not have that big IT function that they can rely on, and so they're kind of different approach for that sort of company. You got an example of something like that?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this one. It's a smaller company. They make fire engines and like vehicles for governments and also military vehicles. And they didn't have a big Java footprint, right? But they had an important one, and they had both of those, the compliance, regulations, all the other stuff that goes around all that stuff. They needed to be stable and solid. They went with us because they had a third-party application. Like we can call it COTS applications. It was built by somebody else that since had lost support for it. It doesn't, like the company that built it is gone. They still get value out of it and still use it in a protected environment, but they needed it to be migrated. They've been trying for about 18 months. So when I talked to them the first time, they're like, this does not this won't migrate. I'm like, give me your hardest one, right? Give me whatever you think doesn't work, right? So we went there. About 30 minutes after we got started, we found out what the issue was. We used an undocumented feature of Java, which is something that Azul knows about. And we've got it working, right? And so that application, which doesn't have any support from their the vendor anymore, but they still need it. They at least are running secure, and they're running on the latest build of Azul, JDK 8 for that one.
Yeah, so I think the kind of important thing to get across there is the fact that we are very we're very anxious to help people with this. We're very the idea of giving support in terms of helping people make that migration where they don't have that big IT department. Our engineers like yourself and even our support people can make the difference in terms of how you go about switching applications to run on Zulu. Like you said, there was an undocumented feature. It's always great when you've got undocumented features to deal with. The other thing there, which is really important to get across, is, and I know you get this a lot, I get this a lot when I talk to prospects and potential customers about migrating away from Oracle, is that the third-party ISV software that runs on top of Java, and then they go, oh, okay, we want to move. They talk to the ISV, and they go, oh, well, we support it on Java from Oracle, but that's it, kind of thing. What we've seen a lot is that customers now are pushing back on those ISVs, and they're saying, well, look, with the new pricing that's involved in Oracle Java, we're not going to pay that much money for running Java just to run your application. So you have to provide support for OpenJDK so long as it's TCK tested. And most ISVs that I've kind of talked to, they're pretty open to that idea. They get that the pricing has changed. They get that people are going to have to switch away from Oracle because of the cost. And so they need to understand that, yes, they will say that, okay, Java is built from OpenJDK, that's the Oracle version. But if you take another distribution of OpenJDK, so long as it is tested using the TCK, then we'll support it and we'll make sure that that runs. And again, one of the things that we do at Azul through our support organization is if there is an ISV who's providing that software and they have issues and they need to talk to somebody about what's happening at the Java level, we will provide that support as part of the platform core product that we provide to customers. It's not just about providing support for the Java for their applications. We will help the ISVs if they have any issues in our Java to make sure that they get the necessary information and resolve any problems that need to be addressed through that. So I think that's very important as well.
So I'll give an example of that. Salesforce data loader, right? It was typically out there. It does like nothing really. And there's no way you're going to pay thousands or even millions of dollars to have this little thing running in your environment. But like everybody has it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They now say use us. Right. So we approached them. We said, hey, there's this application. People don't want to pay for the Oracle Java cost because of the licensing model is so restrictive. Why don't you standardize on us? And they didn't standardize on us. They instead standardized on OpenJDK. And that meant us as well. Right. Mm-hmm. So it goes both ways, and it's really important.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, coming back to what we said earlier, OpenJDK is the open source project. We build a distribution of that. It's the analogy I always use with this is it's like Linux. So Linux is an open source project. You can download the source code to the Linux kernel. If you want to, you can build it yourself and you can install it on your machine. Most people don't want to do that. So they get a distribution from Ubuntu or Red Hat or SUSE or whoever. And it's the same with OpenJDK. You're unlikely to want to download the source code and build it yourself. What you do is you get a distribution from us or from whoever else provides distributions like Adoptium or Corretto from AWS, somebody like that. Yeah, so there's lots of ways to get around this. I guess the other thing that we see is that we've talked about this idea of how easy it is to move applications when it's like on the server side, and you talked about 5,000 machines all migrated in very short time. Even with smaller applications, that's easy enough. Sometimes there are things that are included in Oracle Java, older versions of Oracle Java, that can be a little bit more challenging. And the reason for that is because they're not part of OpenJDK. And the things I'm talking about specifically here, and I cover these in the book, is what are called desktop deployment technologies. And that's primarily applets for people who are still using applets even now, and Java Web Start. So I'm sure you've come across customers who've been using those and have still wanted to migrate to using Azul's platform core underneath those. So what kind of things can you say about that?
Well, first, thanks for putting it in the book because that just made my life tons easier. No, honestly, there are applets, JNLP based, Java Web Start based applications that are still running out there. I see it all the time in any meaningful Java shop. They're still around, and our ability to support that, it's best effort, right? In cases like that, there is situations where things are so old, certificates have expired, things like that can happen. We will absolutely try our best to get it. And I think I'm at around 98% success right now. Across all the other engineers, I think they're better than me. Like it's around 99% for them.
We
But
have better engineers than you.
yeah, no, but yeah, we it's kind of a running thing. It's a challenge for us to say like, hey, I just got this app to go, right? So yeah, from our side, we take pride in it. We do actually support as best we can these things. Our support staff is awesome at this as well. So if you've got something where you're trying to update certificates on the thing or re-sign jars in order to bring an application from like 19 or 2015, I won't say 19 something, 2015 to to current, we can help you with that stuff. And even if it's a third-party vendor that you've got their ear, we will talk to them and help them with that stuff as well. That's really important, actually. Choosing the right partner to do this with is that's I've seen people go and try to do migrate over to Tamarind. It'll work if you've got the time, effort, and you put the effort in and you got the expertise. But it takes a long time. Every time something goes wrong, it's all these things that we've learned in doing it that we bring to bear back into our support teams and stuff like that. So having a good partner to help you along the way, I think it's sort of a plug for our company, but at the same time, I've seen it be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because if we think about this, I mean, because I kind of lived through the history of Java, and I remember that in terms of Web Start, it was never made part of the formal standard, but there was sort of part of it that was kind of standardized. There was what's called a JSR for the Java Network Launch Protocol, or JNLP. And one of the problems that I know that I've seen some of our engineers have to address is the fact that the JNLP is a standard, and so people write their files according to that standard, and then they find that the way that the Oracle Web Start has interpreted that, it doesn't actually match the standard. So it can be a little bit challenging in that sense. And we use an open source alternative that way, which is IceTWeb. And so we use that, and that sometimes interprets the JNLP files a little more strictly than the Oracle one does. So ones that pass through the Oracle one get caught by the IceTWeb, which is using the standard. And then so we have to make a few changes there, but that kind of thing is reasonably straightforward for us to address and things like that. But as you say, things like certificates as well, we know how to deal with that. And one of the things, I mean, in your, if you had to guess, how many customers have you actually kind of helped make the migration?
In the last 2 years, I mean, since Oracle did this change, it has ratcheted up precipitously, right? Last year, I think it was 72 that we worked on. This year already, we're in the hundreds of companies, big, small, and in the middle, right? And every single one of them, they do it themselves, right? They might have somebody come in and do the I don't know, hands on keyboard or the analysis for them, but they actually are the ones implementing it. It's the best way to do it is to develop a focus team in-house that knows what they're doing and knows your specific requirements, and then use that as the main sort of group that pushes out these automations and pushes out this self-service and the carrot, the stick, whatever you want to use. Right. It's not that hard though. That this is the thing. It's not something where you're going to have like, I don't know, a big consulting firm come in and do some massive analysis that's going to take a year to complete. This is all like a 6 months or less situation.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think that that's a really good kind of data point to look at. Is like just you on your own have done, well over 100
Yeah.
of these migrations with customers, and you're just one of our engineers. So overall, we have experience across the organization of literally hundreds of companies, and that's from, like you said, small companies that are dealing with like one or two applications, a few machines, right the way up to multinationals that are migrating, thousands of applications, tens of thousands of, what was it, 100,000 servers that are migrated in certain cases. So we kind of have addressed all of the different sort of possibilities. So it does mean that when it comes to approaching another migration, we've got the experience and we kind of get what it takes to do that. And that again comes down to why we did the book, was to help people understand, so that if you're looking at doing this, rather than having to kind of think, okay, where do I start? Just pick up the book. You can download it from our website. It's free, so there's no charge for it. It's a nice, easily digestible size. It's sort of 60 pages, and that's quite fairly well spread out. So there's a lot of information, but it's in a nice digestible format, giving you lots of information there. So I guess that sort of kind of brings an end to the particular things that we were going to talk through in terms of case studies. What I'll do now is let me switch back to sharing my screen.
And while you're doing that, Simon, one thing
Sure.
for everybody on this one, the book is a good reference guide. If you run into things as you're migrating, there are sections, and it's structured in a way that you can find very quickly what might be the issue that you're seeing. It's a great resource on the side. I still use it right now when I run into issues.
Great. So here's a couple of links here, because this is the third webinar that we've done in the series of webinars around the launch of our book. And so what we've done here is, if you missed the first two, there's links here that we can see. You can either use the QR code or the bit.ly link there, which the first one we did was what happens if I don't migrate? So what are the dangers of not migrating? That's not a good idea. Do migrate, because if you start running on older software where you're not updating for security patches, even though Java is nearly 30 years old, we still see security vulnerabilities being reported in that. Fortunately, we haven't had any critical vulnerabilities for quite a while now, but there was one critical vulnerability, even the first release or the first update after Oracle stopped providing free updates, JDK 8. That was a 9.0 CVSS score. So that was the first one we did about the dangers of not migrating. The second webinar we did more recently was around tools and techniques, just going into a bit more detail about the process that we use, and understanding how to approach it from a sort of figuring out what machines you've got that are using which versions, and then planning the migration, and then doing the testing afterwards. So there's lots of extra information there if you want it. So what I'll do now is we'll see, I think we actually have got some questions. So, yep, there seem to be a few here. So let's go through these. So first question is, what's the amount of tests in volume estimation aligned with the amount of code to be migrated, amount of work? Of course, depends on the version and the quality, but is a finger in the wind approach. I guess the question there is more about what approach should we take to testing once you've made that migration? I know I've got my theories on this. What would you say, Jay?
Litmus test only. When you're talking about migration, you're going for swaths, big swaths of change. We don't go down to code though. You don't have to recompile. The jars are still going to be the same. There's no application changes. Migrate the JVM, and then just make sure that the basics run, except for a couple things. If you've got reports that are being generated that have PDF output and have certain fonts, that's one thing that Oracle Java has in it. The fonts that they have are proprietary, and those we've run into issues. There's a thing called the CCK, the client compatibility kit, that resolves that issue, gives you fonts instead. But again, those fonts are slightly different. And so any application that you have that's running that has like a space for a window or a text box, you just have to check those kinds of things. But it's not full regression testing. It's not full, you don't have to do code coverage for this.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I mean, my kind of taking it on this is that it depends very much on what you have as tests available for the application. I mean, some applications you'll have a full set of regression tests. If you've developed the application in-house, you've gone through a very formal process, you may have a full set of regression tests that you can run. Great. If you've got those, run them and make yourself comfortable that everything works in the way you expect it to. But as you say, most people are going to be like, okay, does the application start? Can I do all the things I expect it to do? Run through the typical scenarios, go through everything to make sure everything works in the way you expect it to. But really, if it starts and it runs with the standard scenarios, the chances of it not working some point later on is infinitesimally small, because, like I say, you're running on the same basic platform. It's functionally identical to Oracle JDK.
I know we're running out of time. I also want to add when we have tested in this way, we've not run it like just looking at it from the outside in. We've done just the litmus tests and the things that when they're starting up, and we have not hit a spot where we found something a week. We take 1.5 weeks for validation in our process, and we've never had to extend that, and we've actually never used all of that 1 week of validation.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, what about COTS applications that only support Oracle Java? We can't migrate to any other Java without having that they would not support us anymore. How is this situation dealt among other applications that have been fully migrated to only one Java distribution, which is not Oracle Java? Yeah, now, see, this is one of those kind of situations that can be quite difficult, because some ISVs, some third-party application providers, they do say, yeah, we only support on Oracle Java. That's where you as a user have to get a little bit sort of have to explain to the ISV that the cost to you of just providing Java based on the fact that you've got so many employees is going to be this number, and to run their application just to provide the Java is going to be this much in terms of the cost. And they have to understand that it's not reasonable, with the changes that Oracle have made in terms of their licensing and pricing, that they only support Oracle Java. They have to be able to support OpenJDK as well. And again, so long as it's TCK tested. So I think that most ISVs that I've spoken to, almost all ISVs that I've spoken to, have been agreeable to that situation where they've said, yeah, okay, we understand, it's not reasonable to pay that much just to run our application on Java. There have been a couple that have been less than willing to do that, but ultimately we've been fairly successful with that. Yeah, I know, Jay, you've kind of come across this as well, haven't you? And we did talk about that.
I have the exact same opinion on this. You shouldn't have to license Oracle. We've talked to several companies and changed hearts and minds. We've had a couple holdouts. But if you've got applications like that, talk to us, and then we can go together. Having a joint force against some third-party application generally tends to work. And the other thing to note, if it says OpenJDK, it will work with Azul Java, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, it's an engineering bug on our side, right? Yep. We'll take on all the Java side of that.
Yeah, I know. I guess that because there's a follow-up comment to that, which is about okay, so they say we'll test our application with your Java distribution. It'll cost $40,000 or whatever. Yeah. Again, you just got to push back on the ISV and say, look, we need to be able to run it on a different Java because it's going to cost too much, and it's not down to us to have to pay for you to do the testing to make sure that your application works on Java. Java is Java, right once, run anywhere. So sometimes you have to be a little bit forceful with the ISV and make them understand that they bear responsibility to some extent in terms of supporting their applications on other Java alternatives.
I would love to have the conversation that you guys are having with them. Get us involved in that one, because that's annoying.
Okay, just one last question, quickly, because I know we are a little bit time-wise. So out of curiosity, do we partner with agnostic partners to help along with migrations? The answer to that is yes, definitely we do. Although we have people like Jay who are extremely experienced in this, and they're very happy to help with the idea of the migration and advice on migration. As you said, you don't do the migration itself. We don't offer professional services around this. It's not what our business model is about. So what we do is we partner with other people. I know in Europe, we work with a company called OpenValue, who are very, very experienced in terms of all things Java, and especially around migration. So they do that sort of full professional services type of approach. And we have other partners in the US as well that we use, don't we, Jay?
Yeah, we have Remend. They're really good at this stuff. There's another one. I can't remember the names. Several of them out there. Also, if there's any partners on here and you're interested, we've got a whole, train you guys on how to do the implementation parts of this as well.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. That's I think that's been an interesting session. What I would just say there is that we have the book there as well. So if you need to contact us, you can reach us at migration@azul.com. So if you've got questions related to that, then please do reach out to us, and we're very happy to help with that. So with that, as I say, we'll be sending you a link to the survey, 5 questions. Be very happy to hear any feelings you have on whether this is good, bad, or indifferent, and anything we can do to improve these kinds of things, because we're always looking to reach out with more information. So with that, thank you very much.
All right, thanks everyone.